I recently shared a short video in which I talked about a little tip to help release tension in your jaw. And somebody asked about a tip for releasing tension in your neck or shoulders. Well, that's a little bit more complex. So I wanted to do this video today to talk a little bit more about that and just kind of generally becoming more body aware for healing. Welcome. I'm Peggy Oliveira. Thanks so much for joining me. So when I say it's a little bit more complex, there's a lot that's kind of going on in this general area. And I just felt like I wanted to be able to talk a little bit more about it because yes, there is a simple sort of trick that you can do to help with that, but it's not quite as simple as the tip that I gave in the other one. And so I wanted to just kind of explore that a little bit more. First, I want to say that holding tension in our body is a very natural thing. It's something that we all do as humans. The thing about being a survivor of childhood trauma is that you experience an insurmountable amount of stress as a child. You don't have the coping abilities, you don't have the support, you don't have the understanding and awareness to help. So everything that you're experiencing not only is traumatizing in terms of the experience itself, what it does to you on an emotional level, but the impact that it has on our bodies is incredibly significant. And it's one of the reasons why so many people who experience childhood trauma have a lot of different sorts of like medical and even just physical types of issues as they get older. So I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to try to pretend that I am and give you all kinds of information around that. But as a survivor and as somebody who has worked with survivors for over 20 years, there's definitely a lot of common themes throughout. And the reason I did that video on the jaw tension is because it was something that I had pretty significant issues with, and I didn't even realize how significant for much of my life, but it really had a pretty significant impact on me, and it really was exacerbated after a car accident. And I know that for a lot of survivors of trauma, there's a lot of jaw clenching and teeth grinding that can happen. Again, it's a fairly natural or normal kind of response to stress. So when you start that as a child, you continue that through your adulthood, particularly if you're unaware of just how much you do it. So the thing about like our neck and shoulders, first I want to say that if you've got problems here, you're going to have problems here. In fact, I suspect that a lot of this that people tend to struggle with, particularly again, survivors of childhood trauma, probably originates a little bit here. But all of this is very connected. And so having difficulty in all of this area is quite common. There's things that we can do that are relatively simple and easy that we can do to start to help release some of that. Aside from like deeper healing and all of that. The tip that I gave about the jaw clenching is just a really quick thing about putting your tongue at the roof of your mouth. When it comes to the other areas, much of it, I think, really has to do with becoming more body aware. So there are some very specific things that you can do to help with this area. And one is professional massage. And if you have that available to you, it is actually something that I encourage a lot of people to do because not only does it help on a physiological level, but I think that if you're going to the right person, getting massage can actually be an incredibly healing experience. So it is something that I recommend. So if you can do massage, I would definitely recommend that. Now, obviously you need to feel safe in doing that. You need to feel comfortable. Don't push it if it's not something that you feel like you're ready for. When I've led retreats, I have done like a spa day, and massage is one of the options, but there are other options as well in case somebody doesn't want to do a massage, because I don't want somebody to do something that they're not comfortable with. And getting a massage can be a very, very vulnerable thing. But if you can, it is something I recommend. And I would encourage you to consider possibly doing a myofascial release massage. I'm not going to get into all of that here. If you've got questions, you can leave them in the comments, but I can talk a little bit more about my own journey with that another time if you'd like. But a myofascia massage can go a long way as well. Now, I will say they can be incredibly painful. You can start thinking that you made a mistake and feel like you wish you hadn't done it. But this is one of those analogies that I draw sometimes. I really see that as similar to the healing journey, that there's aspects of the healing journey that can be painful, but some of them are really necessary to move through to get to where you want to be, to ultimately feel better. And when it comes to our physical body, I think that can sometimes be true as well. And whether that is fascial release, might even be like a dental appointment that you've been putting off, or maybe a gynecological appointment that you've been putting off, that maybe there's some pain associated with it, some discomfort, even emotional discomfort, but you're doing something that is good for you. Now, obviously, you need to manage your own pain tolerance and know what that is and that sort of thing. Yoga is another thing that can actually help significantly when it comes to releasing tension in our bodies, not just here, but everywhere in our bodies. And it's one of the reasons, actually, the primary reason that I talk about it as often as I do, because it can be really gentle. It can be a lot more than gentle. It can be really hard, but it doesn't have to be. In fact, the kind of yoga that I'm talking about that can be helpful really isn't those extreme types of things. It's not really hot yoga and really intense sorts of things where you have to be really flexible and all of that. I'm just, even doing chair yoga actually can be really helpful. So there are some things like that you can do, and I think those can be really great, and I would generally recommend them. However, there are also things that you can begin to incorporate on a regular daily basis that can go a long way. And so, again, having a lot of tension here is completely normal, unfortunately. It's also something that sometimes we can be a little unaware of, because it's become kind of our natural state. Maybe we're used to being in pain, we're used to feeling uncomfortable, we're used to not being able to sleep well because we're uncomfortable. Like, there's a lot of things that can go into that just become very normal for us. So part of it can be just intentionally at different times in your day, working to become aware of what's happening in your body. And I've talked about this in different ways for different reasons before. And part of the reason I have is for this reason, because when we can be intentional about noticing what's happening in our body, kind of thinking about the idea of where and how is our body in space, it goes a long way of bringing awareness to what is present. And from that awareness, we can then do something to help shift whatever might be uncomfortable or creating some sort of discomfort. So maybe it's first thing in the morning, last thing before you go to bed, maybe both. Even thinking about building it into a habit, and this takes time, habits take time, but getting into a habit where you think about it every time you sit down at your computer, or every time you get in or out of your car, every time you wash your hands. It could be anything. Thinking about what's happening right here? What's happening in my shoulders right now? Am I clenching my jaw? Am I shrugging my shoulders? Take a moment right now and notice what's happening in your body. Just notice. You don't have to change it yet. You don't have to, certainly please don't judge it. You don't have to do anything. Just notice. Where are your shoulders? How are they feeling? How are you holding your head? Are you looking down? Are you looking forward? Is your head moved forward? Or are you? I was. Or are you sitting up straight with your neck in alignment? Most of us do not sit this way, at least not for very long. It's a practice. The more you do it, the more natural that becomes. But for all kinds of reasons, in part related to being a survivor of childhood trauma, we constrict. And when we learn to constrict very early in our lives, we continue to do that throughout our lives, unless and until we're very intentional about shifting how our body is in space on a regular basis. So we tend, even before cell phones, we tend to do this because this is a protective thing. That's what is natural for our body to do when we are in a stress response. We protect. So it's very natural for us to do this. And obviously that's affecting our shoulders, it's affecting our back, it's affecting our neck and our jaw. So noticing, where is your body? How is your body in position right now? And especially since cell phones, we often tend to be forward and down. People are starting to get lines. I know I am a lot younger than ever before because we tend to be like this so often. So just noticing, where is your body in space? How are your shoulders? How is your jaw? Is your head turned? Because a lot of us we're so used to a level of constriction or discomfort that we don't even necessarily notice when we're putting strain on something. So do you tend to sit with your head turned a little bit? If so, that's going to put strain throughout this entire area and even down further. So working to be mindful of keeping your head forward facing. So building this habit into checking in with yourself first thing in the morning, every time you wash your hands, whatever it is, just noticing. And if you notice that this is happening, then just take a deep breath and move your shoulders back and down. And you might even, for a moment, practice taking it like pretty significantly back and down. Now, you're not going to stay like that. We don't want you to be in that position ongoing, but to kind of exaggerate it a little bit so that you really get a sense of the difference in how that feels. And for a lot of people, even just trying to do that can feel really uncomfortable because your muscles are shortened over time because of that constriction. So noticing that, just taking a moment, and then generally speaking, so this can be an extreme exaggeration of that, and practicing that every now and then can be good, but even just noticing if you're forward a little bit or you're up a little bit, just noticing and then kind of letting them melt down a little bit. So we tend to be up here, so when you exhale, just kind of letting them release. And then taking a deep breath. And if your head is forward or you're looking down, bring your head up so your chin is parallel to the floor. We often can look down, but sometimes I find myself sometimes with my head up a little bit. So I have to be mindful of that. And if you are looking at something over here and you're going to be looking that way for a little while, maybe think about repositioning your entire body. Because when you're straining this muscle, you're constricting this muscle if your head is that way for very long. So literally trying to practice that periodically throughout the day. And again, if you build it into a habit with something else, if you associate it with doing something else, it's easier to create a natural pattern of doing that. Certainly, first thing in the morning, it can be really good to do that. Last thing before you get into bed or before you go to sleep can also be really good. Actually, being in the shower and doing that can be really good too, because we tend to be completely distracted when we're doing something that is very automatic for us. Like, how often do you get out of the shower and not really remember your shower? Like, did I wash my hair? I don't remember. I don't think that's just me. We tend to not be very present. So it's very easy then for us to, again, get into this pattern. So especially with the warm water flowing over you, just taking a deep breath and letting your muscles relax a little bit can be helpful. So really building it into part of your natural routine does go a long way. Now, you're not going to notice any sort of difference immediately. You might even feel some discomfort because you're not used to being in that position. I know when I first tried sitting up straight after years of probably never sitting up straight, my back would actually feel kind of uncomfortable and sore and like, okay, this isn't good for me. Well, it was good for me, but my body wasn't used to being in that position, and so it felt uncomfortable. If you've gone to a chiropractor, you probably have a sense of that too after an adjustment, assuming you're going to somebody qualified. After an adjustment, sometimes you can feel a little bit more sore because your body isn't used to being in that position, the healthy position. And the same thing is true for massage as well. So something relatively simple, at least in theory, putting it into practice takes intentional effort. It's not something that will happen naturally. You have to really work at it, just like all things with healing. You have to be mindful, you have to practice. But the more that you do it, the more benefit there is and the more natural it becomes. I find myself still sitting forward, still looking down and all of that. But I also find myself naturally, periodically sitting up straight and making sure that my neck is in alignment. I take deep breaths very naturally now. I don't have to think about doing it. I naturally have my tongue at the roof of my mouth. I don't have to think about that at all any longer. That definitely has become my natural state. So if you haven't seen the video that I'm referring to with the jaw clenching, I'll make sure to share a link for that. But I wish I had something really simple that I could share with you that would be just shift everything and be able to release all of this. But it is a practice and it will take intentional effort to be able to do that. If you can do some yoga, there's lots of free yoga online. Again, you can do chair yoga. It doesn't have to be all the twisty stuff that makes you feel like you won't be able to do it. It can be really simple types of things, especially for the upper body. If you can do that, do that. If you can do massage, I think that can be really beneficial. If you like exercising and you have access to Pilates equipment, and I'm saying equipment because it helps move you in positions more so than our own body will allow us often to move. Doing Pilates is, I would say, probably the thing that helped me connect to my body more so than anything else. Yoga did, but I didn't do yoga consistently at the time that I started doing Pilates consistently. So Pilates was the first thing that I really did consistently. So that's what really helped me. But the reason that I encourage people to do yoga so often is because it really is, or can be anyway, truly very healing for our body and our mind. So those things can be really beneficial, and I definitely encourage them with somebody. I think with both, maybe yoga, but certainly with massage therapy, somebody who is trauma informed, or if you feel like you can use your voice, if something's not comfortable or something like that, then trauma-informed wouldn't necessarily have to matter as much. And then with yoga, trauma-informed would be good, but it doesn't necessarily have to be, as long as you're honoring your body and what you need. And then practicing some of those other things on a regular basis. And don't beat yourself up if you forget. Don't beat yourself up if you go days without doing it. Just anytime that you remember, you start again. That's what it means to be human. None of us are perfect. Building a habit takes time. And even when we build a habit, especially when it's something that's good for us, it doesn't necessarily always happen automatically. So I'd love to hear from you. What did you notice coming up as we kind of talked about this today? Are you more aware of what's happening in your body? Oh, I do want to say too, so our hip area, particularly for people that experience childhood sexual abuse, I think this is true also for childhood trauma generally, but especially for childhood sexual abuse. We tend to carry a lot of stress in our hips. And again, yoga can be really, really helpful for that. So doing some different things, even like sumo squats, can be really helpful as well. Don't push it too far, but the more that you practice, the deeper you'll be able to go, but that can help as well. Just don't strain yourself, because you don't want to create an injury on top of the strain and discomfort that your muscles are already feeling. So another area that we tend to carry a lot. So if you have any questions about anything I shared today, feel free to share it in the comments. If you haven't yet subscribed, make sure to do so and click the bell for notifications. Thanks so much for being here. I'll look forward to seeing you next time.